So as you'll see in this example, when it comes to CSS, 2 plus 2 don't always equal 4. And you can definitely run into some bizarre math when you're dealing with margins of various elements that touch the margins of something else. So let's go ahead and let's look at a web page that we're going to be discussing this with. I have a really simple web page that just has 3 paragraphs, and I've gone ahead and created some styles for the paragraphs so that we could see where the border is, where the background is, and I've added a little bit of margin and padding. So let's look at the web page and see what we have here. The first thing I did was create my universal selector and set the margin and padding to 0 for everything to remove those. Then I set the width of the paragraph boxes to 400 pixels. I set the border to 1 pixel solid black. Then I set the background color to a light gray. I made a left margin of 20 pixels just to push these boxes away from the left-hand side of the browser a little bit. And then I have margin top of 50 pixels and margin bottom of 30 pixels. So when you're looking at the web page that we have right here, you can basically know that all of the top margins on the paragraphs are set to 50 pixels and all of the bottom margins are set to 30 pixels. So this space right here should be 50 pixels. And if I go ahead and just get my pixel ruler and we measure from the very top of the browser to the beginning of my paragraph, you can see that that's exactly 50 pixels of space right there. Now, you could assume, and it would be reasonable to do so, that when you're looking at these paragraphs, if I had 50 pixels on top and then 30 pixels on the bottom, the space between these two paragraphs should basically be 80. 50 plus 30 would be 80. But the distance is not 80. You would be wrong to think that. The distance is actually 50. So if I get my handy dandy pixel ruler here and I put this at the bottom of the top paragraph and I mouse right here, you can see how this is exactly 50 pixels once again. So once again, I'm only getting 50 pixels of space. So you might be wondering, how the heck is that happening? Where is the 50 pixels coming from? Basically, when top and bottom margins meet, they overlap until one of the margins touches the border of the other element. In this case, it's the larger top margin is touching the lower of the paragraph is going to touch the lower margin of the paragraph preceding it, and it basically is going to set how far the elements are set between each other. So in this case, it's 50 pixels. This effect is basically known as collapsing, and basically the web browser uses the largest margin. That's how it always comes out. So whenever you have top and bottom margin setting between two elements, it isn't going to add the margins together like you might think it would. It's actually just going to use the largest one. So keep that in mind when you're designing, because it's definitely going to become important. If I wanted 80 spaces of 80 pixels of space here, I would need to go ahead and set these differently so that I would actually get 80 pixels of space. To make this 80 pixels of space, let's say I just wanted 50 at the very top, I could go ahead and leave my margin top to 50, but if I wanted 80 pixels, I would actually have to set the bottom margin to 80. And if we save now and we refresh, now I'm going to get 80 pixels. If we measure at this point, once again, this is at the bottom of the top paragraph. If I come down here, you can see how now I'm getting exactly 80 pixels of web space. So this is a really important concept. Keep this in mind when you're working on web pages so that you are going to be spacing elements correctly. You also need to know that only vertical margins collapse. Horizontal margins don't collapse. So if we had two elements that were side by side and they had a horizontal margin, both like margin left and margin right, set to 20 pixels, the space between the elements would be 40 pixels. They would act as you would expect them to. They are added together. It's just the vertical margins that basically are going to just take on whatever is the largest one. So that's kind of something special that is indicative to margins, and you'll definitely need to be aware of that as you design your web pages.